All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our 7th Street interviews. This morning, we have Kirsten Sandiford and Cheryl Loggy. Thank you, lovely ladies, so very much for joining and allowing me to ask you questions and stories about 7th Street. So glad you're here.
Yay!
Yay! So I'll start with you, Cheryl. How did you come to be at 7th Street, and what's that story? I don't know that. I know that.
Have I not told you? It's probably there's people on this Zoom that have heard this story, so forgive me if I repeat myself or if it's changed because my memory has altered in 20 years. I first came to Richmond in 1991. I was working for a video post-production house in DC, and I'd grown up in DC, and I went to school in Williamsburg, and I just really hadn't lived anywhere different. And so the company I was working for said, we're going to open up a satellite facility in Richmond, Virginia, because there's tons of ad agencies down there, and we need video post-production there. I'm like, let me start it. Let me, help be the organizer, like the behind the scenes person. So I moved here, lived in Tobacco Row I was the first person in Tobacco Row to live in my apartment. And it was awesome. And Scott Loggy and I were already in love, but he had decided to go to LA to see about, working in film. So we were a cross country new relationship with long distance still in effect. So there was hundreds of dollars each month spent in phone bills. And I'd gone to church all over the place when I grew up Southern Baptist, and then decided that kind of wasn't working very well for me. So I went to an Episcopal church, then I went to a Pentecostal church, then I really was a mishmash. So when I came to Richmond, I just started looking, different places. And I went to St. John's up on Church Hill, for whence the hill was named. And kind of dug that because it was so historic, and they actually shut you in the pews. And yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool. But it wasn't really a faith community or anything like that. And I tried Grove Avenue Baptist, which is out on Parham Road, like every church in Richmond that's on a name street that's not really on the street it's on. And I just kind of popped all around, and then I kind of just didn't go for a long time. And then I got a job at Agecroft Hall and had to drive down Malvern every day to get to my job. And I saw 7th Street on the corner every single day as I was driving to work. And I didn't know anything about Disciples of Christ at all. And I went, and not unlike some others, went to that Sunday school class first, where people were openly talking about faith and questions, and not necessarily a literal Southern Baptist interpretation of the Bible. And I'm like, I could get into this. And that was it. So I've been there ever since.
Awesome.
It's a long story. Sorry.
No, thank you for the recap. Kirsten, I'm going to ask you something similar. Like, what is your kind of past or history of you and Steve kind of and the family connecting to 7th Street?
Yeah, well, it started before Steve. In my first marriage with Taylor and Gilly being young, we would come to 7th Street because my mom and Neely went here, and we would come for all the special events, the Christmas plays and Santa and Easter, and just the special times where everyone shows up, right? Mm-hmm. And so we did that for many years. And then when Steve and I started dating, we would visit 7th Street from time to time. At the time, John Barnes was thrust into the minister position, given what had happened at 7th Street. And we really connected with John, Steve in particular. Steve grew up Methodist, I grew up Baptist. And it was really when Rick first came in, well, back it up, Will Wallace married us at Meadowbrook. And then when Rick Harrison came in, I think it might have been his first Sunday, that's when we joined. But it was really the connection with John Barnes and the people were so, you know, nice, and I felt like I had known them over the years. So that's kind of how it took place.
Wow. And then thank y'all. Thank you for sharing.
I didn't know Wallace married you too, Kirsten.
Pardon me?
Wallace married Scott and I too.
I can still remember our rehearsal dinner and him talking with my brother-in-law, and the conversation was so fun and lively. It was
Yes.
It was like the best rehearsal dinner I've ever been part of.
Yeah, that's crazy because you know, Jess and Ian just were married yesterday afternoon, and Cheryl came to help, and we were just talking about how you and Scott Loggy were married in church 25 years in a couple weeks, and that Will Wallace performed the ceremony.
Yep.
We were actually married at Meadowbrook outside on a very
pretty.
day. I don't know how we got so lucky, but
what and either of you could start, but what are some of your favorite memories of 7th Street Christian Church?
Wow.
Cheryl sent me one yesterday. I mean, Hallie and Sarah sang one time. That was really cool because Sarah was a little more shy than Hallie, and I think Gilly helped them with that. And there's
we'll have to post that. We still have that on tape somewhere.
Yeah, and there were so many like Christmas pageants that were hilarious. I mean,
hilarious.
I remember something like they did the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in one. How they pulled that together with everything, I don't know. But yeah, there was one Christmas when Taylor was Joseph, Gilly was Mary, and Hallie was an infant, and she was the baby Jesus.
That's great. Yeah, there seems to have been a lot of, when I look at well, sometimes it comes up on like our church Facebook page, or I've seen pictures and read where we really did a significant amount of like different pageants and stuff. Were those intergenerational, or were they mainly focused like with the young people involved?
I think they became intergenerational when we started running out of kids and had to throw in some grown-ups for filler, you know? But they were always so much fun. I mean,
so much fun. And Laura Richardson was so talented with fabrics and making things, and she could take a piece of material and make it the most gorgeous gown in the world. So
as a matter of fact, when we bought our house, the Richardsons lived 2 doors down from us, and we bought our house directly from the people who lived here before. And they're like, oh, we'll leave the window treatments because they were made special by Laura Richardson 2 doors down. I'm like, Laura Richardson, she goes to my church. Richmond's a very small little tangled web.
Yes.
Yeah, there is something interesting about Richmond where, you know, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and for 10 years, and like I could walk down the street and never see anyone really that I knew. But here in Richmond, just in the 3 years I've been here, I can go anywhere. And I mean, there's similar sized cities. I can go anywhere and I will run into people I know, like whether it's church people or people I've officiated weddings for, or just met through other friends, like whatever. And that never happened in Raleigh. And it's something about Richmond. I think it makes it really special.
Yeah.
What are other, like, I'm curious, you know, Cheryl, I know, and the church knows this, and so now we'll record it for all of history. The church has been there for you in lots of different ways. I think about the infamous tree that fell on the house. And are there any other stories that you wouldn't mind like sharing?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, the church has been for our family like from the very, very beginning. And I think I mentioned yesterday, like the first thing was I had barely just joined the church when then I ended up getting engaged. And I'm like, I wonder if they think I joined the church just to be able to get married in the sanctuary. And so, 20 some years later, let me testify, no, that wasn't the reason I came to 7th Street. But I mean, just from the get-go, just very open and very conversational and very accepting of sometimes what I thought were my kind of crazy interpretations, like right out of the gate. And then just as life became life, when we got married there, and then when we found out we were expecting twins, that creative studies class downstairs threw us a baby shower and gave us a double stroller, which is no small ordeal. And then Sandy Blacker, who also had twins, Paul Blacker's mom, couldn't have been more supportive. And there was multiple like occasions of celebration and showers, and the church was just fantastic. And Darren and Sarah were dedicated, but Rick Harrison did a dedication service for them. And Marjorie Forstman, who had been serving in the nursery, I think she served over 40 years in the church nursery. I guess I was just like, if they would cry, I didn't want to leave them in there, and I would bring one baby one Sunday, one baby another Sunday. Some days I'd bring both babies. And they felt loved and supported from the get-go. And then when Scott first was diagnosed with cancer, when the babies were 4, just the church was incredible. And then when he had a recurrence in 2009, and it was a massive recurrence. People were, Rick Harrison was calling, and people, offered to come. Now, what I really loved about 7th Street is people offered to come to the hospital, but I'm not really that kind of person. And so people were great about it. I was like, thank you. Just please keep praying. You don't need to, Scott's kind of not the bring the chaplain in kind of person. But the church was fantastic with, support all around. And then when he had a recurrence again in 2011, and we realized we needed to go to UVA and do in-person treatment, Kim and Chris Crowley came and lived with our kids for 2 weeks, and our dog, who had white fur and occasionally diarrhea. So how that works. And they they were church. They were God to us those times. And everybody at church has been so supportive and prayerful. And then the tree hit, and it makes it sound like we've had a really tough life, but we've really had a wonderful life. And the church has been incredibly supportive the whole way. Week of Compassion helped us. The church foundation helped us. And we were like, we have insurance. We're fine. It's all good. But you don't realize that's where church people's experience came in. They're like, it takes a while for insurance to work. And you don't want to take the first offer that insurance gives you, because they're trying to tell you it will take less money than it will to rebuild your home. So just everybody was wonderful. And I will tell this one quick story at Terry Ragsdale, I know is here. He was so sweet, like in the days immediately following. And he's like, I just want, I want to meet with you. The church, I want to touch base with you. And we were flying around and talking to insurers and to trying to help the people that were gracious to welcome us into the house, just on and on and on. And he's like, well, let's meet in the Kroger parking lot. And I went and got in his car, and we had the windows down, and a bird flew in to the car where we were talking and fluttered between us. It was like a Holy Spirit dove or something. It just fluttered there and then flew out. I'm like, I've never experienced anything like that. And Terry was there to tell us that the church wanted to offer us some help and gave us some cash. It was like the weirdest thing. I was like, Terry has got some kind of otherworldly, bring the birds of the Holy Spirit in when we're doing the work of God or something. It was amazing.
Oh, that, I remember you sharing that story. That's, it's just, I don't know, there's something about it. It's so funny and clever, and you're right. Yeah, kind of a moment of this hopeful dove, this hopeful, peaceful dove that is gonna come and hopefully symbolically calm everything, right? So
yep. It was probably a sparrow, but I think I picture it as a dove in my head.
It was white. It had a leaf in its mouth.
And it did. Oh, well, thank you for sharing those stories, Cheryl. And Kirsten, I'm curious too, like what stories come to mind of like how the church has been there for you, or in what significant ways, big or small, it's played a part.
Yeah, I think, just has always been a place for our family, for the girls growing up. The youth group wasn't large at that time, but, throw 4 teenagers in there and it makes it bigger. And they had good adventures and, very one-on-one time with the leaders that were in the church at the time. So I think 7th Street has been so accepting of our youth in no matter where they are.
Yeah.
You get for bringing 2 moms on.
Oh, well, I think,
Garfer.
say again?
Claude Garfer
Mm.
was a jewel. He just loved the kids. He loved them no matter how weird they were. They were weird sometimes, so.
They're being kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Claude Taylor was a leader for the communion stewards. She never would have done that if Claude hadn't told her she could, that absolutely, I've got your back, you can do this. And, that makes a difference in a child's life. So.
Yeah, I think we've shared several stories in the last few weeks about the importance of the church on the lives of young people, and whether that is knowing, like, families and parents knowing that 7th Street is a safe space for their children and a safe place for their children, a place of courageous space where, no matter what your age, you can kind of live in and grow into your questions and stuff. And that as well as a safe and courageous space for young people. And I think I shared this last week, Hogan and I were talking about the impact of, the church on our lives, of how it and led us to being in ministry. And not that that's the end result for all young people, but I think it absolutely is shapes, no matter what we do, whatever our careers are, shapes the lives of young people in really important, informative ways. So thank you guys for sharing those stories.
Really thinking about the fact that Hallie and Sarah could get up and sing in front of a group of people, that's just the opportunity. I mean, and the fact that they knew, all these kids grew up knowing they were loved is huge.
Yeah, it's so important, so important. So what other, I'm curious, where have y'all been involved, like, leadership wise, in 7th Street? I know that y'all I know y'all are involved, but for the record.
Oh gosh.
Well, I've done choir. I did, I've been on the board.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes it's the more subtle things that you do in the church that have the biggest impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about your husband who loves washing the dishes, right? It's the
right. Yeah, and I mean, we had, again, another platform. We were able to invite the Lynchburg College Choir, when Gilly was in it, to 7th Street.
Oh, wow.
And Steve was into making tacos for them afterwards. And
he still is.
Yeah, you never know how many people are coming. And
yeah, it's always the behind the scenes stuff. And maybe that's actually an interesting question of, like, what are the behind the scenes stuff that, whether you've done, you or Cheryl or your families or even other people, like those the mystery angels, right, that are keeping things going. I know the Richardsons were deeply involved always, like in cleanup and, like you're saying, like decorating, and Steve Sandiford always being at the helm of the dishwasher after a potluck, or knowing that I can trust him to like bring vats of chili.
But I mean, I think of Steve Cheney, you're not my family, Steve, but like, I think sometimes over the years without the Cheneys doing some of the things they did, like we would fall far, far behind where we are. So we're all family.
Yeah.
We're like that insulation that you spray and it takes in the space, you know, like there's gaps and you spray that foam in, and people were like the foam, like periodically the foam comes in and makes sure that there's not too big a gap anywhere.
That metaphor, I think, really works. I think that really works well, actually. I need to write that one down for a future sermon.
So like Flex Seal, like seal it all in.
Yeah.
If I could say just for a minute, watching all of your children grow up has been one of the most wonderful parts of being at 7th Street. Watching Sarah, Daryl, all the girls, you know, it's been great.
I would like to say that I remember Gilly singing the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. That was amazing.
I start singing again so I can go and watch.
I remember Scott Loggy, one of his favorite things with when all the kids were all little together, they would do like children's Sabbath, and for communion they would give out goldfish crackers and grapes, and Scott Loggy just thought that was the best thing ever, you know. And like they were like five, like all of them like 5 and 6 years old. They were so little. And I remember Sweet Karen like wiped out with his tray of goldfish and just scooped them up and put them back on the, you know, put them off the floor and put them back on the tray. And thankfully, I think somebody swooped in and kind of refreshed those and took the other ones out, but we're all still alive. So
I'll never forget. There was a time when I think they were in middle school, maybe upper middle school, and they were doing the children's Sabbath, and they had this bread that they just pulled out of the freezer that was, I think it was,
oh my gosh,
supposed to have been baked.
Oh,
Allie took a piece and she stood up. I mean, it was awful.
It was horrible.
Up there just like, and she still talks about that bread to this day.
Don't blame her. It was awful.
It was terrible.
Oh my gosh. I won't use that bread.
It was like eating that insulation, how I would imagine.
Yeah. I remember Sarah Loggy threw up in your car one time, Kirsten.
Oh yeah, we ate a lot of things at the pool that day that probably didn't match.
I will never forget. I'm like, how can I ever make up to Kirsten that Sarah threw up in their car?
No. Gave me an excuse to trade it out too eventually.
Oh my gosh, see the deep connections and relationships built like through. Are there any people like saints of the church, past or present, like that have been influential, either in stories? You've talked about Claude Garver, and are there others that come to mind that we should remember? And yeah,
Stuart Slusher. He was one of the kids' favorite babysitters when they were little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Measure my life before and after.
Oh, thank you guys for talking about vulnerable and hard things. Yeah, I think even in the hard, vulnerable stuff, you know, like those are stories that we can remember. And for those of us like who might be watching this, Stuart Slusher has passed away. Has it been about 10 years? A little longer? I don't know the.
Has
May
it?
10th. It was May 10th, 2010, I believe.
So
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah. So
It was on Mother's Day, I think.
it
It
was
was.
Mother's Day. So I think, that's yet another example of even when life is really hard and the church showing up. And no doubt, like
Just
having
open the doors.
show up for each other, right? Not just for the Slusher family, but knowing that this young person, you know, impacted so many people in the life of the church. And so that loss was felt by so many. And I think about,
Mildred and Jim Bruce as well. Mildred and Jim Bruce have always just,
Yeah.
that's Jim. He was so much fun and like had that like we would do a trunk or treat and he'd have that robot broom going around.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was the best picture of him and the broom and my mom.
what
Oh my
what
gosh.
is this broom? What?
It was like a robot candy dispenser broom that like it like walked like in the Fantasia broom that like would walk on.
Almost like a Roomba.
Yeah, it was like a Roomba.
A Roomba. Oh,
Yeah, and it had candy in it, and he would just get so tickled, and he was so great with all the kids, and just such a joyful spirit. And I always just looked to Mildred for wisdom and insight, and Loretta Taylor, like she
Loretta.
knows the right words for everything.
Sausage balls too.
Yeah, oh, so many. Like everybody, I could look at every person on here and go boom, 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 boom.
Oh my God, yes.
They're all saints.
All of them. The rat tails giving McDonald's gift, like that was like godsend for kids to have a McDonald's gift card. Man, they love that action.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, in my last question for you guys, as we wrap up, so we have a few minutes before service starts. What are your hopes for 7th Street Christian Church as we look to the future for the next 189 years? Or just in the next year?
I think about the work that we're doing on the committee with open and affirming. We're just, in the infancy of exploration. But 7th Street has always been so open to differences. I just go back to the children and differences. And I just hope that we continue to be open and open our arms, and no matter where anyone is in their life, bring them into the church.
Just let them know they're loved. I mean, I think ultimately that's what's made it great for our kids, and what's made it great for us is that at 7th Street, you always feel that you're loved and you're accepted. And I'd like to what Kirsten's saying, just extend that more broadly. Make sure everybody feels that when they come through our doors.
Amen to
And
that.
that we can go through the doors again.
Yeah. I hope one day you can come through the doors. There just may not be worship happening. We're still there. So, well, friends, thank you all so much for your time today. I appreciate everyone who has been willing to be interviewed. Nancy Garver, Terry and Steve Cheney, Kirsten and Cheryl, thank you all so much. And I think in the future, maybe not next week, but we should keep this going, because I think sharing these stories it's good for our hearts and souls right now. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. And I'm gonna